Ew, no! Mom, can we just not talk about this?
You're listening to Parenting in the Rain podcast, episode 43.
Welcome to Parenting in the Rain, Insights from the Experts podcast, providing parents all around the world with valuable knowledge to help with the biggies of family life. Here's your host, a registered play therapist, education specialist, parent coach, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hi there, Jackie Flynn here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Parenting in the Rain podcast. I absolutely love meeting you like this. If you ever have a topic that you would like to have covered on the podcast, just shoot me a message and let me know, and I'll do my best to try to either address it myself, and if I don't feel competent enough in that area or confident enough to speak to what you want covered, I will find an expert around the world, somebody that can really kind of speak to that topic. So let me know. But if you've sent me a message previously and I did not reply, I just want to say sorry. Yesterday, I opened up my Facebook Messenger and I had like 15 messages that I had not seen. I couldn't believe it. For some reason, it didn't notify me. So go ahead and send me an email. That's the most reliable way, Jackie@JackieFlynnConsulting.com, and I'll do my best to try to get your topic covered on the podcast. Or if there's enough of them, I may do an Ask Jackie episode. So be sure to reach out and let me know what you want to know about. When I checked my messages that I hadn't found, I found a message from a friend that I was in the Army with years ago that I lost contact with. I was just checking it yesterday after my client left. I had a few hours in between sessions and I was getting ready to record a video for my website. And I thought, let me quickly, I think I was sending a message to somebody else and then I seen that message and it was from last year. And her name is Stephanie. So Stephanie, if you're listening to this, I'm giving you a big shout out. I love you, girl. She was my roommate at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We spent the good, the bad, and the ugly times there. We really worked hard when we were in the Army. But she was my roommate at Fort Campbell. And then we met up in Korea. We were stationed in Korea at the same time. And then she was my roommate in Savannah, Georgia, in the barracks all these times. Savannah, Georgia, Hunter Army Airfield. Very special to me. Means a lot. We spent some of the hardest and the best days of our lives together right there in our BDUs in the United States Army. Such good memories. All right, at the time of this recording, it's right at the beginning of November, and we had such a wonderful Halloween. I hope you had a great Halloween, too, if that's something that you celebrate. We went up right before Halloween to go see my sister in Illinois, and we had such a great time. I love her. We just really had lots of just fun and really good food and spent some real quality time together. It was really neat. And then we come home and the kids got their Halloween costumes together, went trick-or-treating, and now we are battling the Halloween candy craze. Luckily, the chocolate is gone, so my temptation is gone from their candy. Do you eat your kids' Halloween candy? Luckily, mine offer it to me, so which maybe that's not lucky at all. All right, well, let's talk about today's episode. Today's episode is about a very serious matter. It's about sexting, and it's what parents need to know about sexting. As we know, sexting can be really done by anybody at any age, but since this is a parenting podcast, we're really going to focus on children and adolescents. And in my work as a child therapist, I have helped clients through situations like this. And it's one of those situations where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It can get really, really messy really quick, and it is totally worth preventing, and it's a huge deal. So today I have have a local therapist in my community that I really respect. I met her at a networking event for therapists around our community, and then I reconnected with her again at a networking event that I actually held at my private practice, just kind of like a smaller type get together. And she really knows her stuff. I really get a lot out of when she speaks and she shares what she knows about this topic and many other topics. She's really, truly is an expert in her field. Her name is Tiffany Trudeau, and she's a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and she's also a licensed professional counselor in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the District of Columbia. She holds a dual Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and criminology and a Master of Arts degrees in mental health counseling. And she has additional training, like the higher level training in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, CPT, cognitive processing therapy, sexual assault response, critical incident stress management debriefing, CISM, and sexual addiction therapy. This girl is really, really smart. So as you can imagine, I'm really excited to have her on the show. What we're really going to cover is what puts a child at risk for sexting type behavior, and we're really going to delve into that definition of what is it. We're going to talk about the shame and the devastation that it causes and how parents can best prevent and respond to situations like this, and talk about afterwards how that the self-esteem and feelings of self-worth can be revitalized, and in those preventative efforts, how can it be nurtured in a way that the child isn't at risk as much. We're also going to cover how to help children and adolescents make different, safer choices, whether from the preventative perspective or from the, okay, it happened, and now we're going to move forward in a different light. People can recover from it. It's definitely easier said than done, but I love that she's really sharing this information on this podcast, because knowing is huge. Having that information can make a huge, huge difference. What I've really recognized from working with kids that have been involved in these types of situations is that a lot of times the parent will have some really large concerns, such as, I do as a therapist. A lot of times my concerns will match the parent concerns, but the child or the adolescent will have different concerns. So it's important through the therapeutic process to really address the children's concerns as well and help them heal from what's hurting them so that it doesn't repeat itself. And so that they don't feel like, okay, the therapist is just another person that's going to lecture me on how dangerous this is, which it is very dangerous, and that educational piece does need to happen, very much so. But sometimes I think that piece can overshadow that the child is hurting. The child is in an emotional state that really is conducive to making these kind of choices. So to get in there and do that deep level of healing, it really takes understanding both from the child's perspective or the adolescent's perspective and the parent's perspective, as well as, okay, how do we prevent this from happening again? Okay, so I don't want to make you wait any longer. Here's my conversation with Tiffany Trudeau. Hi, Tiffany. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me. I'm really excited about our talk today.
Me too. Tell us about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Tiffany Trudeau. I am a licensed mental health counselor practicing in the state of Florida in the Suntree area of Melbourne. I am a certified sexual addiction therapist as well as certified to work with individuals, adults, and teens and adolescents using dialectical behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And my specialty is mainly in mood disorders and trauma in both adults and youth.
Wow. So you have a lot of training. It's nice to have someone like you in our community to be able to refer to when you need somebody that has some really good information in those areas. And that's why you're on the show today. I want to talk a little bit about sexting, especially in terms of adolescence. Tell us what that is and what puts a child or adolescent at risk for such behavior.
Certainly. Sexting is such a new phenomenon that we are experiencing as parents, as adults, as therapists, because here in the last, 20 or 30 years, technology has expanded in a way that many of our generations before us just couldn't even imagine or fathom. And so sexting is the combining of the word texting and then with sex. And so in general, sexting is including any exchange of material, images, words that is intended to sexually arouse or is sexually charged in some manner that is exchanged over an electronic device, whether it be a smartphone, a computer using email, or an application that one might find on their smartphone and or computer.
And I know it's risky behavior for any age, but when we're talking about our kids, it really, really seems so just urgent, emergency, like it's big stuff. What puts kids at risk for this?
It is very urgent, and it's also really prevalent because a lot of kids are doing it. In fact, some statistics say as many as 32% of individuals ages 12 years old to 18 have sexted on at least one occasion. Mm-hmm. And so the risk is important to identify. And so there's the very basic risk of kids just being curious, that they all have this device in their phone. I mean, everybody has a smartphone. My daughter is in elementary school, and she has peers who are 9 years old who have smartphones and want to FaceTime with each other. So kids are getting these smartphones younger and younger. And when you have that smartphone, you have that immediate access. And so that risk is also related to access, that young people have their phone all the time with them in their backpack, in their pockets, and they can pull it out and they can say whatever they want to say. And they have this sort of false belief that they can do whatever they want to do and that there's this anonymity. And so we've got curiosity that is playing a factor. We've got the access with cell phones being so readily available. And then we have peer pressure. We have individuals who are being requested to send sexually charged material, or peers that are bragging about the sexually charged material that they have sent or have received. And then young people, they want to be included. They want to do it too.
Yeah. And I know, with children, they have that limited brain development because it doesn't fully develop until they're 25. I know for 21, 25, making huge decisions like that. And the impact of it, where that picture goes or that video goes is just, it really kind of makes my brain and my heart hurt thinking about the potential consequences of something like that.
Absolutely. And these young people, and not even just young people, I will say that adults are doing this as well. This is not just a young person's issue, that sexting is something that happens amongst anybody really who has a smartphone and uses it. But there is that confusion of sending that information, thinking that it may be private, being sent to a romantic partner or a peer or someone of that nature, and then that information either being shared without the sender's knowledge with malicious intent, or young people engaging in this behavior thinking that they're talking to a peer that is their age and only to find out that on the other end of that camera or that text is somebody else, somebody who has been misrepresenting themselves. And that just opens the door up to a lot more heinous and serious infractions regarding online behavior.
Yes, and the safety factor is huge, the fact that they're putting that out there and they don't know who it's going to. But even if they do know who it's going to, I think it's one that really involves that they feel like, hey, if I share this with this person that I trust, even if they're 12 years old, and it goes far beyond just that devastation of having your image out there. There's a lot of shame, a lot of I feel like a bad person or I am a bad person cognitions going on in their head. So can you speak to that element of shame and any other big emotions that could really kind of manifest themselves through this?
Absolutely. Some people, parents alike, can consider sexting as par for the course, something that in essence is going to occur regardless of what we do as parents. But when our young people are sending these messages and these images on their phone, oftentimes they're not premeditated. They're not spending a lot of time planning to send this information. It's something that is happening very quickly without a lot of forethought going into it. And when things happen very quickly, as you mentioned earlier, young people's brains are still developing. And so when things happen quickly and once it's out there, they can't take it back. And so for that person who sends that text or sends that image, even if that image doesn't get out to the wrong person, there still is that risk of that shame of, oh my, what did I just do? That it's out there, I can't get it back. And then there's the fear of how is the person on the other end receiving this? And that feeds into not only the shame of, as you said, I'm a bad person because I've done this, but it also can feed into individuals' self-esteem and self-worth, because I don't know if you've ever taken a selfie on your cell phone, but as technologically advanced as these cell phones are, they don't always represent you in the most favorable light. And so young people, especially our young women, can be taking these photographs on their phones, and then that photograph becomes a real-time image of what they and how they see themselves, which can just break down their self-esteem as they stare and pick and point out all of the flaws. And so you have the shame, you have the guilt, you have fear of what's going to happen with this image when the receiver receives it, and then how it just impacts their image looking at this picture and kind of ruminating and perseverating over it now that they have it there in front of them.
Yeah, that body image is really it. And if they're doing those types of things, there's a good chance that maybe their self-esteem is already at a low level because they're looking for that assurance, that gratification. I know through my work, I've noticed that, definitely it's adolescents and adults, but it's that really that deep inner, like something's wrong with me, I'm defective, and then I can't trust anybody. You really can't clean it up. It's kind of like putting the toothpaste out of the tube. Once that picture's out there, you can't get it back in.
Right. And that produces so much anxiety. Again, if we go back to some of those risk factors, one being peer pressure. If you have a young person, even as young as we're talking 12 or 13 years old, who might have a romantic partner or involved in a romantic relationship where their partner is requesting for these pictures to be sent to them or is initiating a sexting type conversation. And then if that young person isn't willing to go along with it and send that picture as requested or continue with that sexting conversation as been initiated, then there can be that anxiety and that fear of, then they're not going to want me anymore. If they don't get it from me, they're going to get it from somewhere else. And so then you have young people that are feeling coerced into doing this behavior that carries its own intense emotions, plus the coercion part of it and the fear of, if I don't do it, what's going to happen?
Oh, that pressure. My goodness. And it sounds like they're putting a lot of their own self-worth on somebody else's response.
Yes, which is very, very challenging because at that age, young people's identities, they're still developing. And so their sense of self can be so fragile at that stage of development that you add in sexting and you add in the ambiguity of trying to read and understand messages over a digital platform, and that already fragile sense of self can be shaken to its core.
Now, what can parents and teachers and therapists, people in these young people's lives, how could they help prevent this type of behavior?
Prevention is, I think, key with everything when we're talking about young people. And with prevention is awareness. Parents, caregivers, therapists, teachers need to be aware that this is happening and that the risks exist and that the risk is everywhere because kids have access to so many different things. I mean, one study suggested that in 2014, the users of Facebook that were below the age of 16 had decreased by a significant percent, presumably because more parents were coming on Facebook, more grandparents were coming on Facebook, and so young people were flocking to other social media and messaging sites like Twitter and Tumblr and Instagram and Keek and WhatsApp. And parents and therapists and caregivers need to know what these other applications are, what these other sites are, so that they know where their young people are spending their time digitally. Also looking out for warning signs. If you have a young person who is overly protective of their cell phone or their mobile device, you're going to want to investigate that, and you're going to want to know what's on that phone. We definitely want to allow our young people to have privacy. I think it's very important for them to have privacy and to have some level of autonomy because we want them to grow into that. But we also want them to know what that means and recognize that as their parents or their caregivers that we need to be checking what's happening on their phone, because if they're overprotective, it could mean that there are pictures on there that they don't want you to see, or they may have visited websites that they don't want you to know that they've been visiting. So being aware, knowing it's out there, and then talking about it. You know, years ago, decades ago, parents sat their young people down and had the birds and the bees talk. And while that talk, still very relevant, very important to have, probably need to be having it much earlier than many parents are having it, but it's still an important talk. We need to equally prioritize a talk with our young people about online and internet safety and how to behave online, not only in the realm of sexual behavior, but there's a lot going on with cyberbullying and being aware of what that looks like as well. So parents being aware and also talking to their kids, having conversations, setting some expectations out there and being open to have that discussion with their kids about what their concerns are about online safety and what their views and their perceptions are, so that there can be this place and this space for dialogue around this issue.
Oh my goodness, these are such great tips, because I think a lot of times we think, gosh, if we just look at their text, then we'll know what they're communicating, or they have Instagram, I'll just check that out. But meanwhile, they could have Snapchat or all those other ones, or maybe something you're not familiar with. You see a new, a little logo for an app and you don't really check it. And I think it's really important. I love that you really kind of address having that communication with them. It can be scary for parents too. They get nervous, don't know what to say. So I think a lot of times it's tempting to just avoid the talk. That leads to more curiosity.
And in this particular area, ignorance is not bliss. I mean, I don't know really any area where ignorance is bliss, but here it really isn't, because we're talking about our young people's safety. And sexting behavior can be a, preface to sexual activity. online sexual behavior such as sexting could also be putting a young person on the path to being exposed to online pornography, which opens the door to a variety of other online behaviors and issues in and of themselves. And so parents really can arm themselves with that awareness and that communication, and then being honest and being authentic and vulnerable with their kids when they're having this talk, and being able to say, this talk is kind of uncomfortable for me, but it's so important, and I care about you enough to be uncomfortable in this talk, and this topic is important enough for your safety and our relationship that I'm willing to have this, and then go into that conversation and really see where it goes, showing your kids that you don't have to have it all figured out as a parent. You don't have to have all the answers, but that you're going to partner with your kid on this issue so that trust can be established and strengthened, so that if your kid starts getting into some risky territory regarding their online behavior, they'll feel comfortable enough coming to you as their parent to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, therapist, I got this text from so-and-so. Can I show it to you? Or something, or this app was sent to me, or this link came to me, and then you can build on that conversation.
And there are kids that'll do that, so that relationship is possible. Even those, for the parents listening, think, oh, kids don't do that. I have seen where parents and children have had relationships like that, but it's cultivated. It's something where you got to put yourself out there. Now, I know when we were speaking the other night, you had talked about when pornography is brought into the picture, that disillusion of a body image that is accurate and healthy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. Pornography has been around, it seems like, forever. Now, with the internet and with our young people, they are known as digital natives because their entire life has been around technology. They were born into a technological age where they know what cell phones are, they know what smartphones are, they know what the internet is. You and me and probably many of the parents, we grew up in a time when there were not smartphones or really cell phones unless you were very wealthy and it was in your sports car. So we grew up in a slightly different time than what our young people are growing up in. When you add pornography into the mix, you have a very interesting and complex recipe that young people have access to pornography. And mind you, only 3% of pornography websites have age verification. 3%. So that means kids can get onto pornography websites very seamlessly. And there's not a lot of barriers to them getting on these sites. And once they're on these sites, they can just be a click away from any and every image that you can think of that involves sexual content, and it's right there at their fingertips, again, on their smartphone, and it's anonymous, and it's private, and it's free. Much of it is free. And so getting to a place with your young people to have that conversation about pornography and internet pornography is vital, because continuing on a road with pornography can have a variety of other consequences. For young men, particularly young boys, they can start to believe that what they see in the pornographic images is what relationships look like, is what, let me take that back, not relationships, what sex looks like. And so when they start moving through into the age where having relationships is important, they have this distorted view of what sex looks like. And there can be a lot of dissatisfaction in their relationships because real people are not pornography stars. Real women do not respond the way these women do in pornographic videos. And then women and young girls on the other side of that are competing with these women who are also not real women. And they're comparing their bodies. They're comparing their their sexual prowess to these actresses who are adults and are not necessarily engaging in behaviors that are real or are intended to be recreated. And so it distorts the whole picture of sex and relationships in a way that, without outside intervention and really being able to talk to our kids as they're growing up in this, can be devastating for young people as they move into adulthood.
That's a good point about the distorted images, especially. And you think about a little girl competing with something that was created in a studio that is not based on what relationships look like. And she's trying to do these type of behaviors that really are going to cut down on her self-worth, and just it normalizes it when it's not something to be normalized.
Exactly. And it's confusing. Again, I mentioned earlier that it's important as parents that we still have the birds and the bees talk, because if we don't talk to our young people about this, they're still going to get the information.
Yes.
They're going to be getting the information either from their peers or from pornography. And so that's where they start to learn how it's supposed to be. And then when they move into that place, in that space where they are deciding to be sexual with other partners, with live partners, going into it with the understanding and expectation that is the experience is supposed to mirror that of what they have seen in pornography, which is not an accurate depiction. And then there's not even that doesn't even address the trauma that if you're a young person and you're 10 or 11 or 12 years old and a peer has sent you a link that has taken you to a pornographic website, particularly if it's a more intense pornographic website that has images that go well beyond even just your run-of-the-mill pornography, that can be traumatizing, and those images can become intrusive and distressing for that young person. And then you add on the shame and the guilt of, I can't tell anybody that I've seen this because I might get in trouble. And then those young people are left to suffer in silence with having those images thrust upon them and having respond to it with a traumatic response.
Yeah, you make a good point in silence too, because there's shame even reaching out and telling anybody, which is sad. And one thing I think is important for parents to know, that if images are viewed on whether it's your desktop computer, a laptop computer, that sometimes pop-ups will occur. And if your child's sitting there on the computer doing their homework, and then there's a pop-up from a site that you visited recently, that could have the same effect too. I've seen that over the years, that's pretty alarming.
Yes, absolutely. And then there are those sites that a parent might not even expect to be a site that is risky, such as YouTube. So you might see your young person, and you might even have all the blocks on their device where they can't go to pornographic websites, and you think, oh, well, all my young person does is do these social media apps, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever you're aware of. Oh, and they like to watch YouTube videos because there's funny videos. And while there's a lot of fun things on YouTube and a lot of educational things on YouTube, there's also a lot of things on YouTube that are inappropriate. And there are ways that young people can get to inappropriate images through seemingly appropriate websites like YouTube, like Pinterest. Pinterest is a very fun site to be on. With it's kind of an imagination or a virtual pin board where you put ideas. But on there, a young person or a person in general could have access to images that are sexually charged, that are still images, but that can lead to moving images and moving pictures. And those are seemingly innocent apps and websites that can have malicious content inside of it.
Yeah, it gives us like a false sense of security. But I think what you really just reminded me of too is it can look fun. It can look like even cartoons. I know there's some anime out there that also has that false body image represented, but in their sexual content. And meanwhile, you get a glance of it. Oh, they're just watching cartoons. And it's not only sex or pornography. There's really intense violence, and you don't have that opportunity to infuse your values as a family in with that kid's education. When you're doing that, they're getting their education from all that other stuff.
Absolutely, which is why that communication is so very important, because it's hard to really keep our kids from everything out there that can be harmful unless we, hide them under a rock. The idea is that rather than isolating them from all that is harmful in the world, that we need to be insulating them, that we need to be infusing them with those morals and those values and nurturing and cultivating that relationship between our young people so that when those harms and hurts come upon them, they know how to respond. And if they aren't sure how to respond, they know what their resources are, being us as their parents, as their therapists, as their teachers, as their adult ally. They know they can come to us.
And that's a really good, safe thought. But if they don't have access to it because of whatever reason in their mind, then they won't. That's when you say a parent finds out that, hey, my son, my daughter has been sending these images or receiving these images, what's the best way to respond?
Parents really want to respond quickly when they find this information out so that there's not a lot of space between the discovery and the discussion. However, maybe not responding immediately, because if you're a parent and you have discovered that your young person has been sexting or viewing online pornography, we have our own emotional reactions to that because of fear, because of anger, because of shame, that we also are going to have that experience. And so as adults, we have to kind of drop into our adult brain and manage our own emotional reactions so that we're not coming into that interaction with our young people with, guns blazing, because that can sever that relationship, that can shut down the conversation before it even happens. And so parents being mindful of their language and, staying away from terms like, I can't believe you did this, or what were you thinking? How could you? Like, this is not how we raised you. Because these are all shame-inducing responses that are coming from the fear and the anxiety part of us as parents trying to regain control. And so before we launch into that type of interaction with our kids, us as adults having another safe person that we can go to and say, I can't believe I just found this on, Janie's cell phone, or I can't believe that this website Johnny is going to, and be able to have kind of that, oh my word moment with a trusted person, so that when you get into that interaction with your young person, you can be compassionate, you can be calm, you can be curious as to, I came across this on your phone, and addressing the elephant that's going to be in the room that the kid might have of, why are you looking at my phone? And being able to address that, hopefully because there's already been a conversation about how much privacy you're going to have on your phone. And then, but going into it with curiosity of, I'm curious, I'm wondering what this means, or what was going on with this exchange. I want to learn more about what is happening here, and really getting into that relationship, that this is not necessarily a time to be punitive. This is a time to increase your awareness of what's going on with your young person that is bringing them to this place, and then educating them on, again, the dangers and the risks and why you want to intervene and why you want to support them in making healthier and safer decisions with their online behavior. But really first having parents manage their own reactions so that they don't come in and say or do something that is going to stop the conversation before it even starts.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good point. Because when something like that happens, it is very upsetting, very scary if you transfer that onto your kid and they're already feeling those scared feelings. They're not even going to want to address it with you. And then they feel like, oh, now punishment and all of this. I love the idea of you saying just kind of reach out to a friend or reach out to a professional. It makes me think of that, put on your own oxygen mask before you do of your child. Make sure you're in a good spot, and then you could address it with a brain that is working fully and not in trauma mode.
Absolutely, and that not being reactive but being responsive. And we have that same, lizard brain where we go into fight and flight when we encounter something that is threatening, or we freeze, and then we may see this image or see this text and think, I don't even know how to start, so I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see it, and I'm going to just keep on keeping on. But those responses don't do justice to your young person and their knowledge base going forward, or to the relationship between you and your young person.
Yeah, and if you pretend like you didn't see it, it almost makes it kind of all right in the kid's eyes, which is even scarier. Now, my last thing that I was going to bring up is how do you prevent this in the future? But it seems like you just addressed that, just that having that good, healthy conversation and kind of connection, that relationship can really help it not to reoccur. If I guess empathy is what I got out of your direction of how to respond.
Definitely being empathetic and being open to hear what your young person has to say, and not just in that moment when it's been discovered and you're addressing it, but being open to your young person over time. That when our kids speak to us, sometimes we're preoccupied and we're doing things that are equally important. Maybe we are doing our own work. Maybe we're attending to domestic responsibilities, and we may tell our kids, not right now, I can't talk, or whatever we say to let them know inadvertently that they're not important right now. Yeah. And if we can, as parents, try to remain engaged, try to remain present with our young people on just a day-to-day basis, even if they're talking about something that is mundane about their day or about something they've seen on TV or relationships, that if we can be present and engaged with them in those moments, then when the big things happen, they will be more likely to come talk to us. And so this is a process that is ever developing. Again, we don't just have this talk one time, and we don't necessarily just want to have this talk after we've discovered something has happened. And so for parents out there who may be listening, and they may say, well, this is not an issue that I have with my young person. I do check their phone, and I don't allow them to have passwords on their phone that keeps me out, and they don't get to keep their phone in their room when they go to bed at night. It has to be in a public place, and I'm doing all of these, in quotes, right things to protect my child. I would encourage those parents, great, keep doing what you're doing, with the caveat of have a direct conversation about the risks, even if you don't think that your child is doing that or engaging in those behaviors or considering those behaviors. Having the discussion, being proactive rather than reactive. We don't wait to tell our children about the dangers of alcohol and drugs after they have been found passed out because they have been using drugs or drinking alcohol. Hopefully we're talking to them well before that. We're talking to them about those dangers so that when they are exposed to it, they can hear our voices coming back into their mind from that loving, caring, compassionate place. And the same thing goes for their online behavior.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you're putting this information out there, because I think that for parents, and I've seen this in my work with kids and parents, that they think, well, it's just so awkward and the child's not listening, and they're like, no, mom, stop. But you know what? The kids are listening, even when they say they stop, or even when they pretend like they're not listening. They retain that information and they can pull on it from later. So that conversation is so important. So what's some resources that you really like that you could share with us?
Well, there's a new book that has just recently been released, and it is titled The New Age of Sex Education, How to Talk to Your Teen About Cyber Sex and Pornography in the Digital Age.
Nice.
And it was written by Dr. Jennifer Weeks, who does a lot of work with young people in her practice, but is also a certified sex addiction therapist. So she has a very strong knowledge base regarding online behavior and being able to support parents in recognizing what is online behavior that can be risky just in general, and then what is online behavior that can become problematic with regards to pornography and the such. And then if pornography online is something that parents are concerned about, there's also a website that is called www.fightthenewdrug.com that gives parents a lot of resources in regards to education about online safety and pornography.
Wow, those are some great resources. I think I definitely put them in the show notes. I think I'm going to order that book for my office myself. So I'll have a link to that website and the book in the show notes. And anything else that I didn't ask that you feel like is important to include in on this?
You know, I think that we've given a pretty good overview of this topic. Really, parents and caregivers and therapists communicating and being aware that it's easy for us to think that we know, think that we're friends with them on Facebook or we're friends with them on Instagram, and so we can see what they do. Yeah. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we may not be aware of, and being able to check our own biases and our own sort of thoughts and feelings and fears regarding online safety. Because if I'm a parent and I am sexting with my partner or my not partner, or if I'm a parent and I am using online pornography myself, that may make my perception different as to how I'm going to approach it with my young person, recognizing that that's apples to oranges. Because if we're adults and we have our fully developed frontal lobe, we're a little bit more informed about the repercussions of our behaviors, hopefully. And so not assuming that our children have that as well. Or if you have the type of values where you just don't feel comfortable talking about these things, recognizing that your level of comfort is not more important than your child's safety. That you want them to be safe. And if you're not sure, really asking yourself, do I want to be comfortable in a conversation, or do I want my kid to be safe when they are in this online digital world without me? Because that's what they are. They're in this world without us every time they're in that world. We cannot be there with them. So being able to check our own issues with it and process our own issues with it, knowing that at the end of the day, we're trying to protect and educate our young people.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're kind of saying that they're more important than your feeling of awkwardness. I know parenting is not easy, so we can manage our expectations in that realm. And I think it's really important to know that model behavior that we want. So if they see magazines and websites that are being accessed by their parents, that may normalize it as well and make it acceptable in their eyes. So that's a biggie. Oh, thank you so much for all this information. This is wonderful. I can't wait to share it with everyone.
Yes, thank you again for inviting me to have this discussion and have this talk. I think it is very important, and I'm excited to see, where this goes and how many more parents are empowered to connect with their young people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. All right. Bye-bye, Tiffany.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I really have a lot of respect for Tiffany. She really knows her stuff, and she is such a good counselor, and she's just wonderful to talk to. She has lots of ambition and lots of dreams and ideas. So we were talking about we might come up with some course content and go into this topic a little bit deeper. So keep on the lookout for something like that. If that does happen, then I will let you know so you can know where to find out where that information is. All right. If you want the show notes to this episode, visit parentingintherain.com, and you can also find links to those 2 resources that she mentioned. If you haven't joined us on Facebook, please do. I have a Parenting in the Rain community group, which I just love those people in there, and it's growing pretty much every day. Someone else is new in there. So join us in the group, but I also have a page as well, and that way I can alert you of new episodes. And if you're a therapist listening, I am launching a membership site called Play Therapy Community. So be sure to visit my website, Jackie Flynn Consulting, or playtherapycommunity.com to get on that mailing list so I can tell you when the launch date's going to be. There's going to be a lot of great resources in there. I am super excited. All right. If you haven't subscribed, rated, and reviewed us on iTunes yet, and you're an iTunes user, please do. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care.